A very good morning to you, and many thanks indeed for joining us on Morning Prime on the 30th of March 2023. It is Thursday. Every Thursday we have Sokoni coming your way, where we take a critical analysis on matters economy, just looking at the state of the economy currently that is being battered by the ongoing demonstrations. Remember, today is Thursday, and to form, Raila Odinga is not rowing back. He's going full steam ahead with the demonstrations today, even when now we had the good officers of the U.S. Senator here in the country and also the church rallying their call to stop the demonstrations. He is in defiance of that. He says it goes on. Also, we have the governor of Kisumu, who is rowing back on his statement regarding also the banning of demonstrations in Kisumu. He says that has been rescinded, so to speak, and the demonstrations will go on in Kisumu as planned. We shall be looking at this and a raft of other issues also on matters economy, knowing that the central bank as well has revised its lending rate. That is for the bank rate, and that is bound also to adversely affect the cost of loans in this country. Other issues at hand also is looking at the current, the surge of oil prices that we can see that is on the international markets that is bound to affect us as well. I'm joined this morning by Professor Gituro Wadaina, who is the professor of School of Business at University of Nairobi, also be the chair of Kenya Vision 2030. I'll be joined later by the chair of Kenya Diaspora Alliance, who is Dr. Shemo Chwodo, and also be joined by the chair of Vision 2030 as well. This is Munyasi Sakwa. And also Nderitu Murithi, who's an economist and the immediate former governor of Laikipia. So we have a full-packed show today, critically looking at what is happening with the current state of play in the economy and the demonstrations. But let me just rope in. Professor, last week we missed you.
Last week or the other week, or both?
Actually, no, last week. I think the other week we were together. Yes.
Okay, yeah, I went to see what is down in coast, you know. Yeah.
Madafu watu hujaniletea asubuhi nyingi, madafu jamani.
Hapo ni joto kali, hakuna chochote hapo.
Joto ikiwa madafu bado yapo tu.
Next time.
Next time.
Next time.
Okay, let's see what is fresh off the press this morning. And we begin with the bold paper, which is the Standard. The back stops here is what is a splash today. The back stops here. It says, flirting with destiny. The dust is yet to settle on the chaotic events of Monday. And another round of demos is on today. The 6 men below, you can see their faces, bear the greatest responsibility of defining the course of events and maintaining the nation's stability for millions looking up to them. Will they step up to the plate? Will they step up to the plate? This is a story that you can follow a comprehensive coverage of it on page 8 of the Standard this morning. Also, we can see some of the subheadlines there, or the captions. We can say, away in Europe, but has vowed that impunity will not define his legacy. Will he finally call his troops to order and engage Azimio leadership? Rigathi Gachagua, that is President William Ruto. Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua says the highest political authority in the land at the moment, he has elected to bury his head in the sand while calling the shots from his office. Also, DPP Nurdin Haji has demanded to be handed the big fish, financiers and planners of chaos, not the sprats for prosecutions. We have Interior CS Kithure Kindiki saying he has proposed radical measure to limit the rights to picket, and said nothing of the biased security response to Monday's events. And Raila Odinga, the principal behind the Monday and Thursday demos, he has stuck to his guns despite fervent calls to back down and call off the protest. He is not rowing back. Monica murdered, Maribe Joey have a case to answer. That story is tucked away on page 6 of the Standard today. Remember, every Thursday you have the Real Estate Pull-Out magazine, where you can get all the wiser as far as the real estate is concerned. Experts, they give their opinion on Kenya, that Kenya is unlikely to see a property bubble. Kenya is unlikely to see a property bubble. That is a story that you can follow inside the Standard this morning. Let's see what we have on the teaser on top. Salary relief for 45,000 nursery school teachers. Salary relief for 45,000 nursery school teachers. The court has made its determination on this. Remember, the ECD teachers, the government was seeking to scale down their salaries, but now the court has given its determination. You can read all the details there on page 5 of the Standard this morning. Also, children keep off parents' lands deal. This is a new development. If you were waiting for your father's land or even to apportion your land, and he's not really, giving any indication that he's going to do so, the court has made a determination right now that it's not your lawful right to actually inherit any land from your parents, right? So you have to fight for your own corner. Yeah, so this is a discretion of the parents, whether they want to give you the land or not. It is up to them to decide. You have no say. You can read the details of the story on page 4 of the Standard this morning. Costly loans beckons as CBK rate up. That is what I was telling you, that yes, the lending rate, the base lending rate from Central Bank of Kenya has upped the ante. So it is ticked up, and that is bound to affect also your cost of loans. Harambee Stars coach promise. Let's find out what the promise is. You can read all about it on page 48 of the Standard this morning. Let's see. The Daily Nation is up next. Fallout in Ruto camp as U.S. wades into row. That is a splash today. Mediation. U.S. Senator meets rival camps as Western nations call for a peaceful resolution. Kenyatta farm raid. Reports of split in government over brazen invasion on former president property. Protest on Azimio to go ahead with demonstrations even after meeting U.S. Senator Chris Coons and church leaders. Azimio says, we are going on with the protest. And tough edict. Interior CS Kindiki puts violent protesters on notice, even as he vows to protect Kenyans' businesses. On, off, and on again. After calling off demos in Kisumu City, Governor Nyong'o forced to make a quick U-turn. He, of course, was feeling the heat from the Azimio leadership regarding the calling off of the demonstrations in Kisumu, where one person died this week. And you can see an incident there. This is Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua with U.S. Senator Chris Coons at Harambee House Annex in Nairobi yesterday. Mr. Coons later held a meeting with Azimio la Umoja One Kenya coalition leader Raila Odinga. All the details, as I've mentioned, you can find them inside the Daily Nation, the Standard as well. How banks made billions as other sectors struggled. They keep on flying. Kenyan banks and record profits last year, in sharp contrast to firms in other sectors that posted profit slumps or losses. The profits rally was driven by a sharp jump in earnings from interest on loans and government securities, and a similarly rapid growth in income from transaction fees and foreign exchange tradings. This story is tucked away on page 10 of the Daily Nation this morning. Property. You can now sell land without your child's consent. This is what we were talking about. A court in Kisii has made a landmark ruling granting parents the freedom to sell their land without consulting their children. The precedent-setting judgment is likely to influence decisions on many lands disputing parents against their children. And this is bound maybe to bring down the machetes that we've been seeing being propped around because of land tussle with the parents. That is the Daily Nation. You can follow the story also inside on page 12. On page 12, yes, of the Daily Nation on property. Why Kindiki was silent over demos is a splash on the front page of the Star this morning. Interior CS told President Ruto he was uncomfortable about certain responses to protests. And this story is on page 4 and 5 of the Star this morning. A day in the life. And we can see here President William Ruto and Alexander De Croo, Prime Minister of Kingdom of Belgium, at the Federal Public Service Chancellery of the Prime Minister in Brussels, Belgium. And that was yesterday. Right, also we can see Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua at Kangosho Secondary School in Madira, Nyeri County. This story, you can read all about it inside the Star. Now, CS Kindiki, 2,000 invaded and stole from Uhuru Farm. 2,000 goons actually invaded, stormed the property. He asked the police to expedite investigations, warning no more violent demos will be allowed. Raila meets Nubian Christian, says demos on. And you can see him here. Wiper Bose, Kalonzo Musyoka, ODM leader Raila Odinga, and Nubian community leader Amani Salim, Nubian at Jaramogi Oginga Odinga Foundation in Nairobi yesterday. Follow all the details inside the Star. This is how it looks. Also there, his take, Ruto, demos not about cost of living, but about some election results. This is what he said. You can follow the story on page 6 of the Star. People Daily up next. Protest Kenya faces tough test. Do or die day. Raila powers ahead with plan to lead demos, overruling Governor Nyong'o for trying to exempt Kisumu. Gachagua and Kindiki sent tough warning, saying any chaos will be stopped. Envoys call for rule of law to prevail. This story continues on page 4, 5, and 6 of the People Daily this morning. And blow to youth in land ruling. No, you cannot stop your parents from selling their land just because you had hoped to inherit it. Children told in groundbreaking verdict that will shake families and shape succession battles. That is the story that you want to follow inside the People Daily this morning. High cost of living, biggest problem for Kenyans. There's a poll there released by TIFA. A survey says 48% of Kenyans, of Kenya Kwanza, and 47% of Azimio supporters worry about inflation. You have case to answer, Joey and Maribu told. This is on page 2 of the People Daily. Well, let me just go back to this suing for peace. That is, we have Western envoys here. They're saying, first, as friends and partners to Kenya, we're deeply concerned by the recent unrest and violence, as well as the destruction of places of worship and private property. It is also damaging economic activity at a time of financial challenges. Civil society, they also have spoken. We are on the brink of the precipice, and unless the current unsavory situation is addressed urgently, we run the risk of flying too close to the sun. And also, we can see a bite here from the CS of Interior, Kithure Kindiki, saying, quote-unquote, no more violent protests shall be allowed anywhere in Kenya, with or without notices. Demonstrations and protests of any type shall prevent it at all cost. And also we can see inserts here of yesterday's meetings where we had the Deputy President meeting with the U.S. Senator there, Chris Coons, I should say. The violence that is being unleashed on the people of Kenya by Raila is meant to force us to bring him to government through the back door. This is what he was conversing with the delegates there. Azimio leader Raila Odinga, we want these demonstrations to be peaceful. We're invoking Article 37 of the Constitution. We also urge those planning to disrupt them to desist. That is the story that we want to follow inside the People Daily. Let's see what Taifa Leo is holding for us. Mjumbe wa handisheki atua Kenya. Mjumbe wa handisheki atua Kenya. Seneta wa America Coons arejea kuzungumza na viongozi maandamano ya kichacha. And you know the story right now, upatanisho wauliza. Coons ambaye ni mwandani wa Rais Biden amewahi kupatanisha Raila na Kibaki na pia Uhuru na Odinga mwaka wa 2018, mbali na kuhusika katika shughuli kama hiyo Ethiopia na Sudan. So those are the good offices there of the American diplomats in the country, the senator trying to bring a happy medium between Azimio and Kenya Kwanza, but we see that also has hit a dead end. That is Taifa Leo. You can read the rest of the details inside the paper. Business Daily. Kenyatta's equity CEO top in 63 billion shillings bank dividends. That is a story that you want to follow inside the Business Daily this morning. The 9 tier 1 banks post 194.8 billion profits. Uhuru's family gains from 7.6 billion shillings stake in NCBA. And this is a story by Patrick Alushula there. And it says families of Jomo Kenyatta and former Central Bank of Kenya Governor Philip Ndegwa and Equity Group Chief Executive James Mwangi are among the top beneficiaries of a combined 63 billion shillings dividends that Kenya's listed banks are set to pay. They're all smiles, as you can see. The top dividends earners here being led by former President Uhuru Kenyatta, 924.29 million shillings. Also 876.65. This is Ndego family. We have also James Mwangi, 685.3 million shillings. We have Gideon Miruki Cooperative Bank, 154 million shillings. And we have Balubai, Chutabai, Patels, Coop Banks, and ABSA, 139.92. Also, we have Peter Munga there of Equity, 37.7 million shillings. That is the story you want to follow today inside the Business Daily. CBK signals costly loans after hiking rates to 5-year low. And American tycoons scout for ICT agri-tech deals in Nairobi. American investors have prioritized deals in ICT, apparel, and agriculture after the Biden administration targeted Kenya as a key trading partner on the continent to develop durable solutions that advance supply chain resilience for the world's largest economy. Kenya's special economic zones get on power rate. Investor domicile in the 15 special economic zones will from this Saturday start paying a special tariff of 10 shillings per kilowatt hour as the energy regulator moves to harmonize rates and entice more farms to set up in the tax-free region or regions. There's a good move from government, and also Britain profit increases to 1.6 billion shillings on cost cutting. That is a story that you could follow inside the Business Daily this morning. In Uganda, this is what is happening. Districts lose billions in massive pay scam. That is what we have on the front page of the Daily Monitor in Uganda. And UPDF flags off 5,000 soldiers to DR Congo. This is on a peace mission there. Uganda, Kenya also signed trade deals. We'll read all about it. We find out what these trade deals are. And Anshids protesters face charges. I remember about the scandal on the iron sheet. That is a story that you want to follow inside the Daily Monitor. If you're waking up in Uganda, let's go to Rwanda. Will school feeding deter Rwanda's green ambition? That is a compelling question there. And it says cutting trees for users would fuel without replanting them is causing the rise of CO2 pollution in the atmosphere. This story continues on page 3. And we can see Kagame Digestive Cancer Institute both discuss partnership. We have an insert here where we can see President Paul Kagame meeting with Professor Jacques Masseouche, founder and president of the Research Institute Against Digestive Cancer in Kigali on Wednesday, March the 29th. According to the Office of the President, they discuss areas of partnership in training Rwandan doctors in the latest technology-enabled, minimally invasive surgical techniques. That is on page 5 of the New Times. Right, we have our guests with us. I will be also showing you the rest of the dailies internationally, also the East African this week as well, and the editorial cartoon. And we just want to get introductory remarks from our guests. We had from Professor Gituro Wanaina. Now we're joined by the chair of Kenya Vision 2030. This is economist also, Bunyasi Sakwa. We're joined by also the immediate former governor of Laikipia, and also an economist. This is Nderitu Murithi, and the chair of Kenya Diaspora Alliance as well. This is Dr. Shem Ochodo. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Thank you for joining us, and thank you for joining us. It's been a while that you've been on this economic table of ours.
Indeed. Well, I'm glad to be here.
Good to see you. Shem Ochodo, good to see you.
Thank you.
Sakwa, thank you. Thank you so much. We had from Professor Gituro Wanaina, who was last week in Mombasa. But generally, just to get an introductory remarks on the demonstrations today, and maybe I'll begin with you, Nderitu Murithi, because you smack dab in the middle of Azimio. As the chair, you can tell us more about the secretariat of Azimio. Let him tell us.
Well, first of all,
we won't see any notification of you actually resigning from being the chair.
Good morning to you, and
good morning
to Kenya and everybody who is tuned in to the conversation. But Ageturo is right. I mean, I was chair of the campaign.
Of the campaign. Oh, yeah. So, okay. So the campaign is over.
The campaign is over.
Or is it?
But I think the question about today, and I would say every Monday and Thursday, it's about Kenyans exercising their rights, their fundamental rights, to be able to picket, to be able to petition, and Kenyans asking, frankly, fairly straightforward questions. The cost of living is high. The team in power do not appear to have a realistic clue as to what they are to do about it. The shilling is tanking. They don't seem to have a clear idea of what they are going to do about it. Promises made about what is to be done around unemployment. There is no evidence of any effort. Electoral justice. And you see, I'm sure the argument is made, but the matter was determined by the Supreme Court. Well, that's fine. But if really you have nothing to hide, like if you're hiding nothing in this book, why wouldn't you like us to flip through it? So, Kenyans are stepping out in that fashion. But what is important for everybody to remember, including the people in government positions, is that the sovereign power belongs to Kenyans, to you, to me, to all of us sitting here, and all our brothers and sisters in Kenya. And it can be exercised directly or indirectly through elected representatives. So there isn't a point at which we say, the power is innate, you have it all the time. And as citizens, you can exercise that power at any time. Now, those who you elect or you donate your power to, if they don't live up to your expectations, it is your responsibility, above all, it is your right to step up and say, look, you are not living up to the reason I donated this power to you, therefore, I am taking certain actions. So that's what it is about. But I'm sure perhaps we'll get into a chance to go into deeper into why and what ought to be happening.
Okay. Let's hear from Bunyasi Sako. Good morning.
Morning, Debal. Morning, panelists. Good to see you all. It's an interesting Thursday, interesting week now it's become. And I think the Azimio grievances, which on paper all seem to be legitimate because somehow or other they relate to sections of the law, so you can't deny them that. Although regime change does crop up, and regime change is not one of those instruments that we know, constitution or other legal framework, I think it's unsettling to the economy because, and sometimes it happens, the political objectives aren't entirely in alignment with the economic statements that are generally made, and we have a sharp economist with us here on the table, Governor Nderitu. He has articulated some of that. I just think it is, in my view, it's a matter that needed to be sorted out a little bit more before the mandarins of reconciliation step in, because they leave unresolved questions that will, like amoeba, wherever it falls, in whatever piece, it will rebuild. And I think we have to be, this is something that I think we have to look at very seriously, particularly on the food prices. In absolute terms, they are higher than they are probably the 5-year average might be. But in terms of how high they have hit, we have come from the highs. We are now somewhere in the middle and hopefully headed down. So the timing of it hasn't really been in sync. I know there might have been other reasons why this was not a priority then. Electoral justice, we had a handshake for 4 years. That was never really the question that was tackled, and so on. So this issue come back to haunt us. And so if we rush to the negotiating table before positions are clearly articulated, and what is said must be what is meant on both sides, we will face exactly the same problems in completely different vocabulary and so on come next round. So we are, in a sense, almost creating a tradition that there must be protests after elections in Kenya are held. And that's a fundamental problem for me. And for that reason, also born out of principle, like others who see what is in the law and say, oh, the law is with us. That's why we're out on the streets. I see a great problem there, that we have a tendency not to face up to the truth when we come to the moment of reckoning. That's my worry.
So do you think that is emblematic of a festering wound that has been there, that has not been addressed, we're skirting around it, that clearly we need now to address it? Because if we go in for this particular cycle and we still have the same issues being raised again, I think we will call ourselves fools.
If you undertreat a cold, you could end up with a very complex problem. That's the problem. You must treat it fully. And if you don't, if you sort of just pamper over it, it will simmer and it may be a much worse problem that you have to face up later. And I think that's the soft underbelly of the stalemate that we have got now.
So we do away with the band-aid solutions that over the years we've been trying. Is also a handshake a band-aid solution? We could say handshake is a band-aid solution, because it seems after this particular regime and at that particular tenure, then we need to go to another happy medium and of course shake hands and then just have a very pseudo peace for that extent for that 10 good years or 5 years. Then we go to another vicious cycle. Let's hear from Dr. Shemutolo.
Thank you very much. Jabal, allow me to record condolences to families of those who lost their lives in last week's picketing, as it's called, or the demos, and also in advance, those families of those who may lose lives today. If the demonstrations or the mandamano, as it's called, continue.
That's not a bit morbid. It's not a bit morbid.
It may be true. That's why we have graveyards. That's why we have graveyards.
It's not idle, because it happened last week.
Yeah.
We know people lost lives.
So you're using the probability that it will be likely.
Protect me from going forward. Dailies colleague. It's nice to see Governor Nderitu from close range in a long time. But yes, I record those condolences because it wasn't necessary for people who lost lives last week to do so. I want to caution people who go to the streets to demonstrate. To be very clear in their conscience that they need to be on the streets to demonstrate and what they are demonstrating for and what they are demanding. At the Bal, I feel a bit nervous that we try to reward hooliganism and thuggery. You just need to be a warlord in Kenya to be listened to be on the decision-making table. But we are rewarding bad manners, in my view. I've said time without number in the past that during 2007, the late president, and I had a lot of respect for him, President Kibaki and former Prime Minister Raila Odinga should have been at the lead of the people who went to The Hague. President Uhuru Kenyatta and President Ruto should have been following, but they survived then, and these two guys went. I want to caution those who are pushing my elder brother into this, that it's not unheard of. It's not a far distance for Hague to be the next destination. And the Bal allow me also to compliment my good former colleague and friend, Professor Nyong'o, for having suspended the picketing demos in Kisumu, even though later it was prevailed on. But I know Professor Nyong'o very well because we have been with him. More recently, somebody was telling me that, why can't you be like your former colleagues, Governor Orengo and Governor Nyong'o? I've been with them very closely. But I told these guys, Governor Nyong'o and Governor Orengo are latecomers into this struggle. When we were with Raila Odinga in NDP, Nyong'o and Orengo were respectively in SDP and Ford Kenya, fighting us. So I know former Prime Minister Odinga like the back of my palm. Okay? So the Bal, my premise is that I think my community are the Luos to speak. And unfortunately, some of the people misleading the Luos are not real Luos, which is the sad thing. For 60 years, we have been through this. I think a time has come when we must say, no, it has to stop. And I must compliment my other good friend, PK, Peter Kenneth. I'm not seeing him in all this. I haven't seen Governor Nderitu in the mix. I want to encourage my other good friends, Honorable Martha Karua and former Vice President Kalonzo Musyoka, they're in bad company. They need to reconsider. I think that's what I would say for now.
I mean, I feel like I'm compelled to jump in here, first of all, because Shem is talking about me, and I'm here, I can speak for myself. Right? The issues of Kenya are not about individuals, Dr. Chudo. The question of unemployment is not about Raila or Ruto or Kibaki or Shem or Nderitu. It cannot possibly be. It cannot. The question of a high cost of living is not about Nderitu. The question of a weakening shilling cannot be about Nderitu. The question we raised here, that there are some fundamental reforms, there are some fundamental problems of Kenya that we have not, in previous efforts of reform, been able to deal with. They are not about particular individuals. So I would like to persuade our colleague here that let us not personalize this thing. It's also not about a particular community of Kenya. Look, the unga is not expensive for Luos alone, or Kikuyus alone, or people from the coast alone. Lunga is expensive for all Kenyans. The young people without jobs are not just in Kisumu. They are in Mandera, they are in Kwale, they are in everywhere. So it's not about individuals. Now, and if we want to, we should peel the onion a little bit. Like when you say electoral justice, what is it about? Let me ask you, Dibal. We are here in this first-class, news organization. As we sit here to debate, the editors are not here. I mean, we don't need agents looking over you to see whether you are doing your job correctly. But that is how we do elections. In any election, we use taxes to hire upwards of 450,000 people to go and conduct elections. But because there is something wrong with the way that system works, agents are required to hire another 500,000 people to go and check that the first group is not stealing or manipulating votes. If the electoral system was working properly, why would we need such a thing? Now, Kenyans, myself included, I mean, I hope what Shem is saying is that he has not seen me throwing stones. I mean, there is more to picketing than
like selling the stones.
Well, yeah, maybe that's what my role is. But I want to remind Dr. Shuda like this. Governments are elected in order to solve problems. So when Kenyans are stepping up and saying to William Ruto and his government that, look, we do not see effort from your side to solve the problem of high cost of living. Why should he get angry? Why should anybody in government get angry? What government should be doing is actually showing these are the steps we are taking to bring down the cost of living. Now, when you talk to of people in government, they will brush it aside and say, look, we are supporting production, we are giving free fertilizer. Or not free really, but subsidized fertilizer. Well, that's okay, but it takes 7 months, 6 months for maize to grow. So even if you give me subsidized fertilizer today, and thank heavens it is raining, it was going to be another 6 months before I have maize to eat. I need maize, I need unga that I can afford today. And there are some things government can and must do, which other governments are doing around the world in order to make life livable for Kenyans. And government, and the economists here will tell you, government is at the heart of determining the rate of change of prices. In fact, government by law writes out that we want inflation, we want the cost of living to be going up by this rate. And that is a requirement of the law of Kenya. So, where is the Minister of Finance in this debate? Where is the central bank governor in this debate? Because CS Treasury puts out a target, says I believe inflation should be, as he has said now, 7.5%. Who is to reach that target? Central bank. Doing what? Manipulating money supply. Now, if government genuinely wants inflation to slow down, if they want the rise in prices to slow down, you would think the first thing they would do is take the statutory legal step of bringing down that inflationary expectation that they create using the law. Because they are not doing that, how can we be genuine? They are not doing that.
So the government is not genuine.
The ball, I think,
No, they are not genuine.
right of reply.
No, I'll give you the right to reply. Let's just go back to...
So yes, the government is not genuine. Because if they were, the number one step they would do is deflate the inflationary expectation.
I would say the government.
But by the way, we need to notify also that the governor now, I think that particular announcement has been made of the central bank governors. So you can make that application. I think you can do a sterling job as well.
As we go to my colleague, the chair of the bank, their term is up, as well as the governor
and the deputy.
And the deputy.
One
of the
position.
deputies.
Yes,
indeed. Yeah.
I think first I want to salute a group I've been having in the military. And it's interesting, yesterday we were discussing these things with them. Very brilliant. And I did a salute to them.
The military?
Yes.
You're in the camps?
Don't worry about it.
Tell us more.
But it's good to have everybody here. Team, to see you again. And Derito, to see you. You have been writing very well on Saturdays, actually.
Well, thank you.
You know, I really lead those opinions, but some I'm persuaded to read yours.
Thank you.
If you look at what this was discussing with these colleagues yesterday, if you look in the system, the shilling, that's a very fundamental thing you have to keep track as a responsible government. The inflation. Because at the end of the day, the inflation tells you how expensive buying the goods. Right now, it hits about 9.5, the highest since 2013 or 2012. The shilling, the highest. And the third one is the interest rates to borrow. And we must appreciate that it's not just here. If you look at what has been happening at the Fed, it tells you the economy over the world. However, that doesn't give you an opportunity not to address the issues we have as a country. And I want to make it clear, a young lady told me last week in class, the Azimio government will not get to State House through Maandamano. That's not possible. They won't. Maandamano, the Constitution is very clear how the process goes to get to State House. However, and I think we need to separate two things here. We should separate very strongly, bring in the opaque group, the 0.01, the 4, and the whole process. And separate, and I agree with him here, the issue of food prices, the issue of fuel prices. That's a very fundamental, it doesn't matter which regime you are in, but we must also condemn with the strongest terms. You know, watu wana busi sasa unachukua unaenda kuuza 1,000 instead of 40,000. I think those are things we really need to. Very interesting that as we talk, there are riots in Israel, there are riots in Germany, in France, but you don't see the kind of nonsense with the riots we have here. And I think we need to moderate that. My point here is, if you look at the issue how the foods have gone up, you go with 1,000, you can't buy what you used to buy. Those are the things fundamentally. And I like what you were saying, Derito, that a government, and I would say a government which must take responsibility, has and can really set the inflation rate. They can set the exchange rate. Therefore, Professor Dungu, his colleague in CBK, have a responsibility to advise that. To me, the issue here, very interesting, the papers, Raila say it must go ahead. Gachagua say it must be stopped. The envoy says the rule of the law. Where is the Kenyan?
The church.
Where is the Kenyan? And I think that's the fundamental. And the Kenyans, what we are saying, without going or killing, which I condemn, it's not the right thing. Without killing, how can we address the food prices? And we have seen in this forum before, John, how can you reinvest maize? Deliberately as a government, we say maize will not go beyond 100 shillings. Very deliberate. How do you protect the dollar? One of the quickest things to protect the dollar is the issue of addressing our exports and imports. From 2000 up to today, we have always had a deficit in terms of exports and imports. And you recall the GDP, one of the key things of the GDP is exports minus imports. If you mess that, you have a problem there. So my reading is that there are things within our hand. Fuel, and I've said here, why can't we protect kerosene and protect diesel? 85% of Kenyans use public means. If Shem wants to use V-Power, charge even 500 shillings a litre, he can afford. So there are things we can step back as the government say. For example, the shilling. We can say from tomorrow, we are not going to import these luxury cars. We are not going to import these things, which are really putting pressure on the dollar. We are going to really do things internally. So in my view, the Madamano, I think we need to think about, we need to have a responsibility, even us seated here, to tell them Mwananchi what's happening. We have a responsibility to protect the property. And you might say, no, it's the Kenyattas, it's whoever, but will reach a time, it will be the Littles, will be Wainainas. So we need to really to look at, in my view, the whole scenario. It's something here, there's a point about the food, there's a point about the fuel, but the way we are going about it is not the right way.
All right, so we can actually look also on the latest development when you're talking about the central bank's lending base rate that has been raised so far. I think this will be the highest in 5 years.
Maybe before that, I had right of reply.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Debal.
But I think it will be unfair. Can we just wait for your chance to get your right of reply, and then you can chime in with your contribution?
Fair enough. I thought you were jumping to another topic.
Yes,
that earlier topic. Because Debal, you know, when my good friend Governor Nderitu talks of this not being personal, being a tribal issue, then I ask, how come I'm not seeing Mandamanos in Laikipia? How come I'm not seeing Mandamanos in Machakos, Kalonzo's place? How come I'm not seeing Mandamanos in Kirinyaga, in Martha Karua's place? I mean, it's boiling down. Even in Mombasa, it's disappearing. The places you find it are places like Sauni, where they're significant members of my community. So really, let's call a spade a spade. Let's not call it a big spoon. I've been in this game perhaps a little longer than the colleagues on the table when it comes to politics. I may be younger in other areas. So to that extent, unless we can call a spade and call the devil by its name, not sugarcoating, we can't go too far. But I know those who support the Mandamanos have used Article 37 of the Constitution, which gives the right of picketing. But that right is not absolute. You know, you can't just start going to people's properties, whoever it is, and start doing whatever you want, as has been happening, both to the mighty as well as the lowly placed. Article 14, you cannot look at the Constitution, Article 37 in exception. You must look at also other parts of the Constitution. 40 talks of protection of property rights. So for people to start destroying others' properties, wherever they are, who own those properties are wrong. So when somebody says, you know, we're going to demonstrate and we're going to march, storm to State House, and to
take the CV.
To vacate to the tenant, I mean, to get him out, really, what's that? We've seen lots of bad things, bad manners happen here that border on treason, actually, if somebody can swear themselves. Really, let's not sweeten some of what has been happening. So my thinking is, I want to challenge the Law Society of Kenya. It's good that is planning to go to court. If it hasn't gone to court, I don't support those many 50, 60 CASS as Kenya Diaspora Alliance. We're considering and joining that case because it's not the right thing to do. There are a couple of other bad things that the government is doing. But above all else, I want to challenge the Law Society also to take the leaders planning these Mandamanos also to court so that they are charged with economic crimes because they are sabotaging the economy. Lastly, I do agree with Governor Nderitu. The cost of living is a pain to all of us, everybody, regardless of the shades and color. What they are not telling us, what's the cost of it? They're not talking about the 15 billion that disappeared in 26 minutes, okay? Confirmed by the controller, auditor, controller of budget, and the CS of Treasury, the former, that happened. They're not telling us the 34 billion shillings that disappeared in maybe the last month of Jubilee administration. These are things, to what extent are they contributing to the mess that we are in today? They're not talking about that. Lastly, in that regard, I also take issue with civil societies and also business associations, which have been very forthright talking about fighting corruption and so on. Some of them used to have breakfast meetings. Why are they silent all of a sudden of the messes that the outgoing regime did?
I mean, allow me, please, John. Allow me quickly, quickly, because you see, he has accused us directly.
Yes. I'll give you. You hold on your horses. Let me hear from Bunyasi Sakwa, so that at least, he doesn't really be unfair to some of us.
Yes,
Poa mheshimiwa. Bado.
Bandu mapambano.
I've listened carefully to the arguments of all my colleagues, and they're very valid. The economics of things is cold, in the sense that it is what it is, but despite that, our governance systems behave in a completely different way. For example, we are now short of dollars, terribly short of dollars. 18 months ago, there was this international survey by a coalition, it's not a coalition, a consortium of journalists across the world. I think they said over 600. And they were tracking many things. Part of what they tracked was illegal wealth that was held in different places. Among those, Kenyans also featured in that. The accounts that are, the numbered accounts outside are usually of illegally transferred funds. Otherwise, Kenyans are allowed under law to invest outside the country, and they do. And you would expect that when those kinds of investments are legitimate, they would enter the trading system, as it were. The dollars would come here when it's right to come here, they would go elsewhere when it's right to go elsewhere. We just looked aside. Now we are terribly, terribly short of that. Look at Israel. It's a strong little country. You wouldn't hold accounts outside and hold public office, because that weakens the capacity of government to manage trade and to deal with the external world. So you tend to bring those home, if for no other reason than for reasons of feeling that you are loyal. What do you call that? When you believe strongly in your state. Now here we are, our governance systems are weak. We look aside when we should not look aside. The stealing and the robbery that occurred in the last regime undermines ability to pay subsidies, for example, because you need cash to do it. But I'm surprised that nobody has been taken to court over that. That's what bothers me about our governance. So you enter this in a very primitive way. A guy dies and the brothers-in-law come and carry away everything in the house because now it's gone and so. Or here we're just getting a transition from one to the next. Governance is a big issue. The issue of subsidies, and this is not only for Kenya, this is true everywhere. When you do the public policy aspects of subsidy, who gains, who loses in subsidies, the Kenyan story becomes quite classic. Fuel subsidies and food subsidies, if you check out where they were terminating, you will see huge concentrations, which means there are people who really did benefit hugely in receiving those subsidies that were not always even applied. Remember, the millers are saying if 4 billion was released, we only got 1.5. The other one didn't come to us. Find out where it went.
Sure.
I mean, there are those kinds of basic governance things that we should be looking at. And let me conclude. Lastly, we have gone through almost 10 years and we're continuing to do it in this administration. That also bothers me. Aggregating parties, I'm calling it that. That let us all go together. Kenyatta had that argument at independence. That there's no need to have an opposition. You know, we were fighting the colonial guy, and now he's gone. So let us just all come together and be one house. How long did it take for that house to become a real problem? And here we are. We went through in the last administration trying to get every political party to go into Azimio and so on. And the people who are doing that knew the weaknesses and danger there. And now again, of course, we are talking about parties getting into the main party in Kenya Kwanza, into the UDA. These are governance weaknesses that we know shouldn't happen, because then you stifle the voice, as it were. But lastly, where is Parliament? You know, we the people are represented by Parliament. I would have expected that by now we would have significant, even landmark legislation sitting in Parliament. For example, just landmark legislation that will bring us to a point of simplifying algorithms, like Professor Wanaina has just said, that, for example, if food prices, if unga prices exceed a certain figure, let's say 100, then there will be a trigger to bring it below that. There's the economic implications of all of that, but you have to prepare for it. If fuel prices, like kerosene now, because kerosene is what is used by the very poor.
Absolutely.
That kerosene prices. I remember in the old days, this is my recollection, in the old days, before independence, the post-independence period, kerosene prices lagged significantly behind price rises in the rest of the fuel, because they were also related to saving forests and so on. That if kerosene prices were lower, then you use for your energy sources, the poor used kerosene, and they didn't have therefore to go and use firewood and so on, or less of it and so on. So I really think that the governance style is the problem. And therefore, where we are now, all these economic questions could be argued in our universities and other places, because they may hold. But what is the political arena is something I assume originated from a sitting like this one. You say now, we don't like this election outcome. We think we won. A whistleblower has told us we won. So we must get into it. And then you suggest, the BAL says, let us go with this as the entry point. The Director says, let us go with that as the entry point. When Aina, the wise one, says, or maybe we shouldn't be doing that. Let us.
I wish it was Solomon.
What Shem is going to say. Then you have a menu of things which are entry points. And these have been selected as entry points. These issues we hear, they're not the real causes, they're just entry points, because we want to deal with what the whistleblower told us. And I find...
But how certain are we that we want to deal with the whistleblowers?
But now the question, even in my mind, even the idea of listening to a whistleblower, and without being racist, in this day and age, Kenyans, getting usually some social scum somewhere in these developed countries to come, and then they run off, and they probably are paid off. I mean, it also shows...
So the whistleblower is the main agenda. And we have all these as the riders now to escort the main issue here.
Yes, because if we don't, we shan't come off too well.
But
look.
So as I conclude, then I'm just saying, one can sieve out the economic arguments on this, and you can have a good economic analysis that will say, just like Professor Reed was saying, that will tell us that these things aren't where they should be. And I think somebody here said that the two big managers, the finance person and the central bank person, have been totally silent. That shocks me also.
Now, and I have great admiration for Dr. Shem Mushimudu, because he was a pioneer of bringing internet to Kenya. A long time ago, we almost said BC.
Before Shem.
Before Shem.
Before Shem. That, when we had dial-up modems and things like that. But on this question of what is causing inflation, is quite wrong. Now, let me start by, and I want to persuade this eminent panel, allegations made either by politicians or even public officials, they remain like that, allegations. An allegation was made that 15 billion was stolen in 26 minutes, and Shem has repeated it here. First of all, when I heard that claim, I mean, I could not believe that the controller of budget would allow herself to go into that kind of, smearing. government monies come from accounts in central bank. If Margaret signed off for monies to come out of accounts in central bank, there must be records of where those monies were going to.
Right.
Yeah. Those amounts, and the question of whether the minister can spend and has 60 days with which to regularize, is all contained in the Constitution. And as a matter of fact, this Parliament did regularize those payments, and there is Article 223 of the Constitution that anticipates that the day government needs to spend, yeah, the authority of Parliament may not be on the table at that moment. So I would not like us to go into that kind of slander, because
But was it 223? That's a question.
Yeah,
It's a cover.
Well, cover or not, all I'm saying is an allegation has been made. There is documentation to show that this was expenditure under 223. Yeah. So it is not us to sit on this table and repeat the allegation. And in that context, I would ask Daktari a different question. You see, somewhere in the Bible, I'm not a good Christian, it says that
I am.
that the log in your eyes,
Yes,
before the
the
speck
peck.
in your neighbor.
Right.
This administration has said, money was stolen before we got here, we found empty coffers. Even assuming that were true, which I don't believe it myself, but even assume that were true, might you care to explain how you have spent the 1.2, 1.3 trillion that Kenyans have paid in taxes since you sat on the chair? Yeah? And I wonder, between 15 billion that we are now debating, and it's a lot of money, and 1.2, 1.3 trillion, so the government cannot run away from her responsibility of dealing with inflation by saying, there was a guy here, he stole. If somebody stole, you should make sure that that person is prosecuted and jailed. Yeah? Be it Ndirito, be it Shem, be it whoever in this republic. But I want to go back to bring the argument back to the table. Look, first of all, many countries, citizens are stepping up to say, we don't agree. In France, they disagree with the idea of raising
65 to 62,
62 to pension, the age of retirement, and they are out on the streets. In Israel, they are unhappy about some changes in the judiciary, and they are out in the streets. In Tunisia, they are unhappy with the management of the economy, and they are out on the streets. In South Africa, the same. Now, I want to deal with this question of regime change that was thrown on the table. Quickly.
Yep.
Quickly.
Because I don't want to cut you, because I'm due for a station break. Just a moment. We are due for a station break, and I see it's almost a minute to 7 o'clock on the nose, so that we can actually circle back with that, the regime change, if you may allow me. So we'll take a short break right now. When we circle back, of course, we continue with more. Also, we shall listen to what the envoy had to say, the statement regarding this ongoing demonstrations. Don't go away. You're watching so